On a remote island off the coast of Scotland, 3 experienced lighthouse keepers disappeared without a trace. No bodies were found. No clear explanation was ever discovered. More than a century later, the mystery remains unsolved. What happened to the 3 men? Why was the lighthouse abandoned? And how can 3 people simply vanish from a tiny, isolated island without leaving a single answer behind? Welcome to Legacy, where we unravel the world's most enduring enigmas. Today, we journey to the edge of the world to explore one of history's most chilling disappearances, the Flannan Isles mystery. Our story begins in December 1900, on the rugged Flannan Isles, a small, uninhabited archipelago located about 32 kilometers, or 20 miles, west of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. These 7 rocky islets, often shrouded in mist and battered by the relentless North Atlantic, were considered the very edge of the civilized world. Eilean Mor, the largest of these islands, rises dramatically from the sea, a stark, formidable sentinel against the raw power of nature. It was here, atop these towering cliffs, that a critical beacon of light was established. The need for a lighthouse on Eilean Mor was undeniable. The treacherous currents, hidden reefs, and frequent, violent storms of the North Atlantic made this stretch of sea incredibly perilous for shipping. Before the lighthouse, countless vessels and lives were lost to these unforgiving waters. Completed in 1899, the lighthouse stood as a testament to human ingenuity against nature's fury, a vital navigational aid, promising safety to sailors. But for the men who manned it, this isolation also brought a profound vulnerability, a chilling disconnect from the rest of humanity. It was a place where danger was not just outside the walls, but could seemingly permeate them. Into this desolate, yet crucial, posting stepped 3 men, professionals whose lives were dedicated to the solitary, demanding work of lighthouse keeping. The principal keeper was James Ducat, a man of 58, with over 2 decades of experience manning lighthouses across Scotland. Ducat was known for his unwavering diligence, his meticulous attention to detail, and his calm demeanor. He was the most senior and respected member of the crew, a figure of authority and expertise, responsible for the overall operation and the safety of the tower. His presence should have been a guarantee of order and adherence to protocol. Working alongside Ducat was Thomas Marshall, the second assistant. At 40 years old, Marshall was also a seasoned veteran of the Northern Lighthouse Board. While perhaps less outwardly stoic than Ducat, he was equally professional and dedicated to his duties. Lighthouse keeping was a tough life, demanding resilience and a deep understanding of the sea. Marshall had proven his capability in numerous isolated postings, facing down countless storms and maintaining the crucial vigil. His experience ensured the smooth running of the lighthouse machinery and the precise recording of all observations. These were not men prone to carelessness. The third man present was Donald McArthur, a 40-year-old occasional keeper. McArthur was on temporary duty, filling in for another keeper who was on leave. He was a man of strong character, known for his gruff demeanor but also his reliability. While some later accounts sensationalized McArthur as a hot-tempered individual, records suggest he was simply a hard-working, experienced seaman, accustomed to the rigors of island life. These 3 men, bound by their profession and the stark reality of their isolated outpost, were a highly competent team. They knew the dangers of the Flannans intimately, and they understood the unforgiving nature of the ocean. They were prepared for almost anything, or so they thought. The first hint that something was amiss came on December 15, 1900. The steamer Archtor was en route from Philadelphia to Leith. As it passed the Flannan Isles, its captain, upon observing his charts, noticed something profoundly unsettling. The Eilean Mor lighthouse, a beacon that should have pierced the stormy darkness, was not lit. In this era, before widespread radio communication, such an observation was crucial. The captain duly reported his finding upon arrival at Oban, though due to severe weather conditions, the news took some time to reach the Northern Lighthouse Board in Edinburgh. A seed of concern was sown, but the full scope of the impending horror remained hidden. Days passed, bringing with them only more ferocious gales and churning seas, making any relief or investigation impossible. The initial report was followed by further anxious queries. On December 18, a supply tender, the Hesperus, was scheduled to depart from Oban, carrying Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, to replace one of the Flannan Isles crew. But the storm raged, grounding the Hesperus for days. Back on the mainland, the superintendent, Robert Muirhead, grew increasingly worried. Lighthouse keepers adhered to strict schedules, their light was their lifeline and their purpose. A dark lighthouse meant either dereliction of duty, or worse, something terrible had befallen its guardians. Every hour of delay sharpened the edge of dread. Finally, on December 26, after days of agonizing delay, the Hesperus was able to set sail. As it approached Eilean Moor, the crew and Joseph Moore peered through the lingering mist and driving rain. Moore, who knew the lighthouse and its routines intimately, felt a growing sense of unease. There was no light. No flags hoisted. No familiar signs of life. The Hesperus sounded its horn, a deep, mournful bellow that echoed across the water, but received no reply. The ship maneuvered to the landing platform, a challenging feat even in calm weather, and dropped anchor. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, but an oppressive, heavy presence. It was the sound of a place utterly abandoned. As the Hesperus crew, led by relief keeper Joseph Moore, slowly made their way to the landing, the normal procedure would have been for one of the resident keepers to be waiting, perhaps with a small boat, to assist with the transfer of supplies and the new keeper. But the shore was deserted. No familiar faces. No welcoming waves. Only the relentless cry of gulls and the crash of the surf against the rocks. The feeling of foreboding intensified. Moore disembarked alone, a nervous energy propelling him up the steep, winding path towards the lighthouse tower. Every step brought him closer to the truth, or perhaps, further from any coherent explanation. What he found next would be seared into maritime lore. Moore reached the lighthouse door. It was unlocked. A chilling detail, as standard procedure demanded the door be secured at all times to protect against the elements and to prevent intruders. He stepped inside, calling out the names of Ducat, Marshall, and McArthur. No answer. The silence inside the stone walls was absolute, almost suffocating. He moved through the living quarters. In the kitchen, a half-eaten meal sat on the table. A chair was overturned, lying on the floor. It was as if the men had been interrupted mid-sentence, mid-action, by an unseen force. The scene was deeply unsettling, hinting at an abrupt departure, not a planned one. Further investigation revealed more disquieting details. The beds in the sleeping quarters were unmade, yet another deviation from the strict rules of order that governed lighthouse life. The lighthouse clock, a central timepiece, had stopped. Most puzzling of all, however, were the missing oilskin jackets. These heavy, waterproof coats, essential for braving the brutal weather of the Flannans, were nowhere to be found. Only one set remained in the tower. This suggested that two of the men had ventured outside without adequate protection, or perhaps, with a sudden, desperate urgency. Why would experienced keepers abandon their post, leaving meals unfinished and doors unlocked, without their vital gear? The questions piled up, each one more haunting than the last. As investigators pored over the scene, they turned to the lighthouse logbook, hoping it would offer some insight. The entries, diligently kept by the keepers, painted a picture of increasing distress. On December 12, Keeper Thomas Marshall wrote of severe winds, gales that were unprecedented in their ferocity. The log noted that Ducat, the principal keeper, was very quiet. On December 13, the entry was even more disturbing. All three men were reportedly praying. Marshall wrote, "Storm continued all day. Never seen such a storm." And then, on December 14, the final entry from Marshall, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all." These entries, if true, suggested an almost supernatural terror gripping the men. But were they entirely accurate? Historians and investigators have since questioned the exact details of these infamous logbook entries. While severe weather certainly plagued the Flannans during that period, some of the more dramatic descriptions, like all three men praying, have been debated as potentially embellished by later accounts seeking to heighten the mystery. The confirmed facts are that the light went out around December 15, and a significant storm did prevent the relief ship from reaching the island for days. The logbook entries certainly indicate a sense of isolation and the daunting power of nature. What is clear is that the keepers were facing immense pressure, alone on that tiny rock, battling conditions that tested the very limits of human endurance. And then, silence. With no bodies and no definitive explanation, theories quickly emerged. The most widely accepted, and perhaps most plausible, explanation revolves around the sheer, unbridled power of the sea. Eilean Mor is routinely battered by massive waves, some reaching incredible heights. The theory suggests that a colossal rogue wave, an abnormally large and unpredictable wave, struck the island. Perhaps Ducat and Marshall were outside, securing equipment or inspecting damage from a storm, when they were suddenly overwhelmed and swept into the churning ocean. The missing oilskins for 2 men support this. It's a terrifyingly simple, yet devastatingly effective, way for 3 lives to be erased. A variation of the rogue wave theory suggests a heroic, yet ultimately futile, rescue attempt. In this scenario, one of the keepers, perhaps McArthur or Marshall, was caught by a wave while performing a routine task on the landing stage or a lower platform. Seeing their comrade in distress, the other 2 men, without fully preparing or grabbing their vital oilskins, rushed to his aid. The North Atlantic, however, is merciless. A second, equally powerful wave, or even the intense undertow, could have dragged all 3 into the depths, leaving no trace. This theory accounts for the missing men and the haste implied by the scene within the lighthouse, offering a tragic, selfless explanation. Other, less conventional, but still tragic, theories have been proposed. One posits a simple, horrific accident, a sudden slip, a fall from the cliffs in the darkness or storm, perhaps while fetching something crucial. However, the coordinated disappearance of all 3 men makes this less probable. There were also whispers of internal conflict, that one keeper murdered the other 2 and then committed suicide or fled, though there is absolutely no evidence to support this. And, of course, the isolation of the Flannans lent itself to more fantastical tales, including abduction by foreign spies, giant sea monsters, or even haunting by ancient spirits, though these stray far from any investigative credibility. The sheer impossibility of 3 experienced men vanishing without a trace from a tiny island, combined with the eerie details inside the lighthouse and the dramatic logbook entries, naturally fueled supernatural speculation. Tales of malevolent spirits, ancient curses, and unexplained phenomena became entwined with the mystery. For many, the idea that something unseen, something beyond human comprehension, could snatch 3 men away was more compelling, and perhaps more terrifying, than the raw, indifferent power of nature. These stories endure because they tap into our deepest fears, the unknown, the vulnerable, and the idea that some forces are simply beyond our control or understanding. The Flannan Isles mystery quickly captured the public imagination. Newspapers sensationalized the story, weaving tales of horror and intrigue, transforming it from a tragic incident into an enduring legend. The isolation of the setting, the competency of the vanished men, and the complete lack of bodies or clear evidence created a perfect storm for myth-making. More than a century later, people remain fascinated because this story touches on universal themes: humanity's fragile struggle against the overwhelming power of nature, the chilling terror of isolation, and our innate fear of the unknown. It reminds us that even with all our advancements, there are still places where the world can simply swallow you whole. More than 100 years later, the waves continue to crash against the cliffs of the Flannan Isles. The lighthouse still stands, automated now, a silent sentinel against the elements. Yet the fate of the 3 men who vanished there remains one of history's most haunting mysteries. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur simply disappeared, swallowed by the vast, indifferent ocean, leaving behind only questions and an unsettling legacy. Some mysteries fade with time. Others grow stronger with every passing year. If you enjoy true mysteries, forgotten history, and unsolved stories, subscribe to Legacy and join us for the next investigation. Thank you for watching.